What's up, gifted family? Welcome to another episode of the show that is the GP YouTube. Just a reminder that if you support what we do here, make sure to go over to giftedperformance.com and sign up for our automated coaching service. For only $1 a day, you'll get access to 15 highly customized training programs, a macronutrient calculator, our meal planning feature that lets you build and save meals based on your macros, as well as access to our private Facebook group. All subscriptions help us in continuing to put out great content to get you to your fitness goals. Thanks for stopping by, and without any further delay, let's get into today's video. Enjoy.
All right, guys, welcome to another special episode of a Q&A with the coaches. Two new faces that you actually have not seen before. On the right or the left, depending on how Skype cuts this up, we've got a smiling mustached face, and that is Dr. Mike Taylor, coming live from, where are you at again?
I'm in Qatar right now.
Qatar, coming live from Qatar, and Maria coming live, Dr. Heyerholzer, right?
Heyerholzer, close enough.
Perfect, nailed it. Coming live from the less entertaining Orlando. All right, so what we're going to do for you guys today is answer some of the user-submitted questions. We got a total of 13. We are going to work down the list in no special order, just the order that we got them. Before we start, let's get into some introductions. So, Dr. Taylor, Michael, where did you give the people a little rundown? Where'd you go to school?
So I went to Florida State for my undergrad. So I'm also a Florida boy. Oh, yeah. I'm surrounded by friends. That's all good. So I went to FSU for my undergrad. Went to the U.S. Army Baylor PT program out in San Antonio, Texas. So that was a fun time. And since then, I am have been a PT in the Air Force. So I'm not currently, but currently out in Florida again, more like Panhandle area, out at Eglin Air Force Base, and am currently on a little vacation out in Qatar, kind of doing it out here. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been up to lately.
All right, so that is pretty cool. So how do you like everything at Eglin?
Oh, it's good. It's good. I mean, it's basically just a typical sports ortho type clinic. A lot of knee pain, back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain type stuff, but it's good.
Is there any difference in your day-to-day from there to where you are now, or is it a lot of the same?
It's a lot of similarities, actually. I mean, I see patients from like 7 in the morning to like 4 or 5 in the afternoon, depending on the day. One thing that is different is I do a little bit of like embedded work. So we'll go out to different units or different like workplaces basically, and just kind of set up shop there, which is kind of good because a lot of times these places run legit like 24-hour ops. So they'll just be like going, and it's not exactly easy for people to get to the clinic to get their stuff looked at. So that's actually a lot of fun. But
and then you've got a strength conditioning background as well, right?
Correct. Yeah. So at FSU, I was into the powerlifting team. So I was there when Dr. Mike Zordos was kind of like doing his PhD work there, and kind of that really influenced a lot of my my progression from that point on. And ultimately was like the powerlifting coach / team president, and got my USAPL club coaching certification and the NSCA CSCS as well. So I try to kind of blend some, PT rehab with strength conditioning. I would say it's like pretty heavily influenced how I'd like to practice.
Yeah, so a lot of our coaches kind of do more than one thing, and Mike is someone who really takes on the DPT role, and then he also functions as kind of like a CSCS for us. So he's someone that kind of helps our clients work through injuries, or helps them kind of train through injuries, and then also has the strength conditioning background as well. And then I wanted to give the people one random factoid about yourself. What is the best breed of dog in your opinion?
Oh man, definitely like a dachshund, like a long one with short
Oh,
legs. Yeah,
you're a wiener guy.
yeah,
Big,
big ween,
big
big wiener guy.
wiener energy coming at
Yes.
you. Perfect transition over to Maria. Maria, where did you go to school? Tell us about your schooling.
All right, so I got my master's in exercise science at UCF, and then I went on to do my DPT at UF, so go Gators. And I also have my CSCS as well. So I have been a practicing PT for less than a year here in Orlando. I'm working with Advent Health and more of the sports med ortho side of things. And yeah, that's where I am right now.
And other things that you do for Gifted? What else? What kind of services do you offer?
I mean, I work with some of the bikini athletes for posing and everything like that, and I'm currently in prep for competition season myself as well. And then, of course, I coach just general wellness clients as well. I do have some experience as a just personal trainer and everything while I was in PT school as well.
Sweet. And your random factoid, what is, in your opinion, the best form of pasta? Are you a rigatoni girl? Are you a penne person? What's the best pasta?
Fettuccine, fettuccine always.
Fettuccine?
Yes.
Fettuccine? You like a
Mm-hmm.
certain sauce on there? You like a red sauce, white sauce?
Definitely white sauce. Yeah.
White sauce. White
Mm-hmm.
sauce. Mike is in agreement.
I
Perfect. That
agree.
means that we can
Yeah.
move on and we don't have to debate the little stuff.
Okay.
All right. Before we start, it is important that we offer up a disclaimer. I'm going to butcher it, and then I'm going to let my two qualified friends jump in and fill in the gaps that I missed. So, our disclaimer is that we are not medical professionals. We are not doctors. If you have an injury, the best route that you can go is to check in with your primary care physician and go from there. Do not get your injury advice from people on YouTube. Just like you wouldn't get nutrition advice from a Netflix documentary, do not get injury prevention treatment advice from a YouTube channel. What do you guys think? Did I miss anything?
Sounds pretty good to me.
Perfect. All right,
Sounds
let's
good.
get on into these questions. So we'll open up with our first question. Our first question is a very, very specific one. It came from someone who just had an acute injury. So the question reads, a right hamstring, acute pop, onset of pain, progressively got worse for 2 months, affecting training legs. Now reports that the right hip flexor and low back pain associated with that hamstring stiffness. Person has been stretching and doing light training. I'm assuming that those interventions haven't done anything for the actual injury. So, Maria, when you see something like this, what comes to your mind? What's step one for you?
I mean, the fact that they heard a pop, I would assume that there's some kind of tear. Depending on whether it's in the actual muscle belly itself of the hamstring or at the actual like insertion point, it's going to depend a lot on the healing time. So my first thought when I would see somebody like that would be to prescribe, some light stretching, everything like that, just to keep mobility in the hamstring. But then I would definitely want some kind of imaging just to kind of confirm how big the tear is. The fact that this person has been struggling for this long without seeing a lot of improvement, I would either think their training volume is just too much still, or B, the tear is worse than they initially thought.
Okay, cool. Mike, what would you do in that situation?
Yeah. So if they're coming to me, so it kind of looks like, progressively got worse for 2 months. If it's like still been bad for 2 months, it very well could be like a hamstring tear, like strain, whatever we'd want to call it. But 2 months, that's a pretty long time. So I mean, you're talking about still having a lot of pain and issues from that point. So I mean, I think I would definitely probably do some similar stuff. Maybe prescribe like a little bit of like light stretching to start out, but also I kind of saw in the notes here that you also want to avoid overstretching. A lot of times I'll find people who have these, like, say it's like in their hamstring seems to be like the popular one, where like if they had a tear or a strain like months or sometimes even years ago, and they just are like chronically, like they stretch it out, they're foam rolling it a bunch, they're beating the crap out of it. A lot of times I try to tell them to like lay off, to kind of stop doing that for a little bit, because it can, we're not really healing anything anymore at that point. I mean, 2 months, maybe a little bit of that, maturation is going on, but more or less, if there was an acute injury, that's long since healed, but we still have this pain that's going on. So I kind of try to convince them to maybe take a little bit of time off from just poking it, that would be probably where I would start. And then, just kind of try to see maybe what they can tolerate with their training and roll from there. That's gonna be a common theme with I mean, probably both of our answers is, what can you do now?
Yeah, so with a strain like that, I think it's important to identify what's the actual grade of the strain, right? And then are there any other acute symptoms that you would look for to kind of indicate what the grade or what the severity of that strain would be, Maria?
Yeah, there's a couple special tests that we can do just to kind of see if there's like the severity of it. But also another thing that I just thought of is kind of looking at the nerve involvement as well, because depending on where the tear is or if the hamstring's very, very tight, it can cause radiating symptoms further down the leg. And so if this person's having like a chronic pain kind of situation after the injury's even healed, then we have to look at, okay, so they've got low back pain discomfort. There might be a little bit of tightness going on. There could be impingement of the nerve itself. So that's kind of the direction I would go with it from there.
Mike, any other tests or anything that you would look for?
Ooh. Yeah, I mean, you could look at all that, and that's probably one of those areas where like it'd be really good if if this is you or if you're struggling with something like this, to go get checked out in person by somebody that you trust, just because you might be going at the hamstring when it could be coming from, say, more proximal into actual into the hip or into like your low back. You could just be chasing symptoms and getting nowhere if you're not kind of getting at, this is, I guess, debatable, but like the root cause or whatever. But you definitely want to make sure you're identifying the true root of what's going on and stuff. So yeah, that'd be one of those areas where I'd want to get checked out by somebody in person to make sure that what we're working with is in fact what we're working with.
All right, cool. That was our long-winded answer. Our short-winded answer is go see a doctor, because if it's not getting better, you should probably see someone. Yes. All right, moving on to question number 2 that we received. We got a question about, and it's a pretty common question that people, or a common issue that I think people run into, whether they be bodybuilders, powerlifters, even like Olympic weightlifters, any sort of chronic pressing athlete, and that's how to alleviate lateral elbow pain during push press training. So, Mike, I'm sure you see this a lot in terms of individuals that you worked with. So what's the actual condition here? What's the cause? And then how do we move forward from this pain and make sure that it actually gets better?
So, yeah. So the pain in the lateral, meaning outside of the elbow, could be, in fact, lateral ep, as we call it, which is basically, and it's not technically like an irritation, but, a tendinopathy of the, extensor tendon group on the outside of the elbow there. You could also be dealing with like a radial tunnel syndrome, which a lot of times gets misdiagnosed. And if you're treating it like it's lateral ep, it's probably going to get mismanaged in that case. And then also, you want to make sure it's not legitimately coming from the cervical spine as well. So, again, go see a doc if you're concerned. But, overall, the things that I would want to look at primarily is, one, training load, volumes, etc. And then 2, looking at like technique and form and how they're performing them. If we are talking about real, actual, practical things that could be done to address this, one thing beyond just like managing your training, kind of deloading appropriately when you need to, not just like pushing, hard all the time. A lot of like thoracic spine mobility. That's going to be another kind of like blanket answer that you're going to rarely go wrong with. But if you're in terrible positions because of your upper back not being able to kind of get where you can kind of put your shoulders in better positions, put your neck in better positions, that can influence things down the chain. So, especially with pressing and with, say, like low bar squatting too, you'll see it a lot. So yeah, looking through it, making sure it is what it is, managing your training effectively, move your upper back.
Maria, any additions to that?
Nope, that sums it up as well.
Yeah. Mike, who do you think has this? Who do you think comes to you the most with this condition? This, understanding that we're speaking to an audience of lifters right now. Which subset of the lifting population do you think that suffers from this the most?
So who do I personally see? It's actually interesting. So back at Eglin, we have OTs who pretty much see, almost all of our elbow, wrist, and hand stuff. Since coming out here, though, we don't have OTs here. So I've been seeing tons of elbows. It's actually been a really good experience for me to kind of brush up on it some more. I do know about them. I just don't practice with it all the time back home. But, overall, in terms of like the population that we're, kind of geared to with this little question and answer, I would probably venture to say powerlifters. It may just be my bias, but especially if we're talking about trying to balance low bar squatting volume throughout the week in addition to benching. I hear it all the time. People talking about like their biceps tendonitis, and then they point into like the outside of their elbow. And it's been going on for months. It's like, well, not quite, but.
So for that kind of group, so let's say you're working with a powerlifter who comes to you and says, hey, listen, I've got this terrible lateral elbow pain. 8 weeks out from my next meet. I've already paid for it. I'm committed. Like, what's a plan moving forward to continue training, but also kind of alleviate some of those symptoms? What are some quick fixes that someone could make?
I mean, so you said they're 8 weeks out?
Yeah, so they're maybe 8 weeks out, 10 weeks out from their next meet.
Well, so I mean, first thing, you got time. You can pull back a little bit first. If you have good coaching, like what's provided with Gifted Performance templates or our actual coaching services. It's a plug
the most
right there.
Shameless of plugs.
Yeah. But so one, I would probably pull back a little bit. But other things I would look at would be, say maybe like squatting high bar or something like that for a week, even if the tonnage, like the actual weight on the bar is less. Like if you were looking forward to squatting, like say a heavy set of 5 or something like that, and you're normally a low bar squatter, accepting that it might be a little bit different this week, but you can take a little bit of the strain off of your elbows with the bar supported further up generally. Other things that you could do, assuming it's actually lateral ep, like the little counterforce braces do work well. They just kind of apply a little bit of compression here. It just kind of essentially changes the mechanics of the muscle itself, where it's pulling from here instead of the actual lateral ep. But if it's radial tunnel syndrome, you're basically just poking on the radial tunnel. It's just going to feel worse. So don't want to do that.
Yeah. Anything else, Maria, on that one?
No, not in particular. I mean, aside from just usually when I see it, it's more of the radial tunnel syndrome. So then, just telling people not to wear the compression. So thanks for putting that in there. And then just making sure that they're actually doing the proper, nerve glides, things of that nature. So if it is more a chronic thing versus just an acute, probably epicondylitis, then I would say, going to see a PT and actually, having them educate you on the nerve glides and everything is going to be really important for sure.
Yeah, shameless plug again. We can't offer those nerve glides and tips right now. So, go to giftedperformance.com, make yourself a free account, and sign up to work with one of our PTs today. They'll help you out. They'll teach you all that fun stuff.
Nerve glides are clutch.
All right, the next one is near and dear to my heart. It came from one of my very own clients who's just getting into weightlifting. And he said, what could be the cause of wrist pain in the front rack position? So a true front rack position for a front squat, catching a clean, doing a jerk, things like that. Maria, what would you say, or what's the first thing that comes to your mind for a cause of pain, for wrist pain in that front rack position?
My immediate thought would be looking at their form, making sure they're not putting way too much stress through the wrists. Because I mean, essentially, if you're putting a lot more of the stress through your chest and shoulders the way it should be, then your wrist should not be like, there shouldn't be too much compression there, aside from, of course, the position itself. But then, of course, just making sure, going back to like that thoracic mobility, if you can't get your elbows up enough, then you are going to have a lot more wrist extension. So those are my first things. And then, of course, kind of finding out what the pain is. So if it's like a sharp stabbing, it's radicular symptoms. We're trying to like pinpoint where the pain's actually coming from. That's kind of important.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that you make that people in that front rack position, they feel like they should be holding the bar with their hand. And those are often the people that complain the most about that wrist pain because they're trying to bear the entire brunt of that load. And people who try and kind of jerk from that position where they've got the whole weight in their hand, you can literally see them try and press the bar with their arms instead of, using your legs like you're supposed to. So yeah, technique is a really good point. Mike, anything you wanted to add there?
I mean, so I'm not an Olympic weightlifter. Thomas has me doing some front squats though lately, and so I've been practicing them a lot more. I tend to personally, because yeah, I mean, my wrist hurts too if I'm just like constantly cranking down like that. I do like the little sloth toe deal where I hold on to it, with like two fingers, and then sometimes like if I'm like at the end of a set and my front rack is failing, sometimes like one arm will even pop out. But I mean, the thing is, if your front rack is, I'm not saying you should do like the Frankenstein front rack deal, but I mean, that should not be the end of what's holding your front rack. It should be resting on your the space behind your anterior delts, right? I mean, so I think kind of going along with what she was saying, make sure that you can extend enough and also protract the shoulder enough to actually hold the bar up there is going to be a big one. I've tried this a couple of times when I was having some discomfort and difficulty with the front rack. I've seen Mike Teixeira, not me, use like he like 3D printed some like handles basically from his bar, and he holds on to them like I don't remember if they're on the outside or the inside, but he's like holding on to a handle on the barbell. And I've actually done that with wrist straps a couple of times, like you use for deadlifting or pulling. You like wrap it around the bar so it's like tied onto the bar, and you just kind of loop your hands in, and it worked pretty well, honestly. I didn't feel as secure as I would otherwise, but in that moment, it helped me front rack enough to actually do the workout. So.
Yeah, it's actually a good little tip right there. Is the because we used to do that when I was interning at UCF. We used to do that with our wrist heavy athletes, so like our tennis players and like our golfers and our baseball players. We would have them use the straps instead. The problem with that was like you said, if you're losing your front rack position and you're losing that barbell forward and you're pulling on those straps, all you're going to do is just pull the bar straight off your shoulders and just dump it forward. So yeah, it could be that the cause of your wrist pain is maybe a collapsing front rack position and the bar's rolling down, and then you kind of have to roll it back up into that position, which could put a lot of stress on the wrist. Now, something I did want to address with you guys was I saw a video from. Are you guys familiar with Dr. Quinn Hennock? He's the PT for Juggernaut Training. He's out in California.
Yeah.
He had a video about perfecting the front rack position. I don't know if you've seen it, and it was basically like a trolling video where he was just like, "Hey, listen, the way to get a good front rack position is to spend more time in that front rack position." Do you think that that's too reductionist in the way that he's addressing it, or do you think that he actually brings up a good point there?
I think he does bring up a good point as far as just the wrist mobility itself. So, I mean, there's not many other things throughout the day where you're going to be in that full wrist extension. So, just being able to get used to the position. Because, I mean, I know for me, myself, when I started doing front squatting, I really had to focus on that, especially because I've had wrist surgery. I had a lot of scar tissue and stiffness. So, actually, just getting used to being in that position. At first, it was not very comfortable, and I did have to do kind of like that little sloth thing, like we were talking about. But eventually, over time, I did feel a lot more comfortable in that position. So, it did help.
Cool. Mike, do you think that that's a position, that true front rack position, that puts you in a more kind of like advantageous angle, I want to say, for actually performing the exercise? Or do you think that the cross arms position is just as good?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have much of an opinion on that. So I personally, like, I don't feel as good using the cross arm thing just because I feel frankly like uneven. I feel like I'm always pushing with one shoulder harder. I feel like I kind of helicopter the bar when I do that, which is not fun to do. I would say it's whatever people are kind of comfortable with. I know plenty of people who do the bodybuilder cross arm deal and they do fine with it. I mean, I think like Dan Green does it, right? Like he's pretty strong. So yeah, I mean, I think it's probably just whatever is comfortable. I mean, for me, I feel like I'm able to it's probably just sort of like a cue, honestly. I mean, I'm kind of thinking about protracting hard as I can the whole time to, really push my elbows forward. Whereas with this, you should still be doing that, but I don't have that same input. So, I mean, I'm probably just not as good at lifting that way, honestly. So I don't know.
So
I think it's probably just
So the reason I ask is because I think a lot of people try kind of like what Maria was saying, where they try that front rack position. They do it for like a week, maybe 2 weeks. They get like 3-4 sessions in. The wrist starts bothering, and they're like, "Oh, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm just going to switch over to the cross arms instead." So is it something that the front rack position, in terms of like the wrist mobility, that's something that you kind of have to give yourself some time to adapt to, right? And there might be some small amount of acute pain along the way. That's just a natural process. Would I be correct in saying that, Maria?
Yeah, definitely.
Mike,
I'd say
did you
that's
want to?
fair. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'd say that makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, so I mean, I don't know if I would say that, obviously if you're trying to like for like Olympic weightlifting, I would say it's probably good to get comfortable with the front rack. So you probably need to. If you're using it as like just a pure accessory, then, who really cares? But, for me, I feel better when I do an actual front rack. So I mean, I'm glad that I'm able to. And if I was having issues with it, it would be something that I would want to kind of work for. And so, yeah, so I think, what Quinn kind of gets at with his video totally makes sense, is you just got to kind of spend time with it. That's going to be the case with a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point there when you say, listen, is the front squat specific, or is it necessary? That front rack position, is it necessary to your sport? For a weightlifter, it's too bad, so sad, love Brad. You have to get into that position. It's part of the sport. But if you're a power lifter doing front squats as an accessory, and front squats are blowing up your wrists so bad that you can't even do bench press the next day, then yeah, you may want to switch over to the cross arm position. That's a really good point. I didn't
Safety
even think
squat bar
about that.
time. Yeah.
Yes, safety squat bar is a great alternative. All right, cool. So that's our front rack position question. Up next, we've got a question that says, and it's a broad one. The people, they love to ask the broad questions. And the question is the cause of the singular cause of medial knee pain or pain behind the patella while squatting and completing knee extension. So let's assume that this individual is taking a squat through a full range of motion. Let's say that they're high bar squatting for the purpose of hypertrophy. What might be some possible causes of that medial knee pain or pain behind the patella? Mike, we'll let you start.
Yes. Yeah. So the cause, probably couldn't tell you the cause. I could probably tell you a little about what's kind of taking place behind the scenes there. I mean, especially like you were saying, Ryan, if they're doing, say, like a high bar squat, it's going to typically be a little bit more knee dominant. So knees are going to be traveling forward a little bit. So, which is disastrous. You should never do this, of course. Joking, but
Nibola.
yeah, Nibola. Oh no. But what's essentially going on? Do I have a knee model in here? Oh, I do. Hang on, I'm busting out the models.
Yes,
Hang
bring
on.
out the models. This is top level content. You don't get this anywhere else.
All right. So we have a knee here, right? So you have your quad. You got the patellar tendon that's busted because you're doing squats. So what's happening though? So when you're, so we'll just assume this isn't going to work the way I thought, but it's fine. Yeah. So as we're bending and as you're extending, the quad is going to be pulling this tendon up. It's going to be pulling your patella essentially up, which is important. It's important to have that. It kind of gives you a mechanical advantage to be able to do stuff like, I don't know, walk, stand upright. A lot of important stuff happens because of the patella. But when this happens, you are going to be getting some compressive force over the patellofemoral joint there. And so a lot of times that can just be a really sensitive area. And for a lack of a better word, it doesn't mean that it's getting like grinded away to nothing. It doesn't mean that stuff's getting like tore up or anything like that. It doesn't mean that you're tearing your meniscus or anything like that, different area. But it's a sensitive area, right? We'll kind of leave it at that. And, there are certainly, connections to the inside of the knee. It's another area that tends to get sensitive, which, might also have to do with potential, maybe valgus force. That's not going to be a all the time sort of deal. But if we're thinking about other mechanisms that could be influencing it, perhaps that. But really, I think the big thing to keep in mind here is just that the knee is performing its job, but it's under load. And, for whatever reason, if it's not feeling it at that point, it's not going to like it the more that you apply more and more and more stress to it. So as far as the cause, the mechanism of what's going on back there, I would say that that's a lot of what's going on. I'll let y'all dwell on that, but Yeah, this is 3D anatomy, y'all.
Beautiful. Maria, I dare you to one up that.
Oh,
Well, I'm just gonna talk about a little bit about how to deal with it. So if it is just a general like tendonitis or tendinosis, so if it's like patellofemoral pain syndrome or something of that nature, then just kind of looking at the overall training volume, the training load, understanding that you may have to back off a little bit, focus on maybe some heavy eccentric, something like that, to kind of get the symptoms under control. Things like knee sleeves do come in handy a little bit, give you a little bit of that tactile cueing. And then, of course, just a proper warm up. I see Anthony do probably like a 10-minute warm up before his leg days, just because he's had the ACL surgery. His knee tends to be pretty stiff, and he will have discomfort like that if he just jumps straight into like hack squatting or something. So just giving your time to actually go through the full range of motion with the knee and really, really focusing on actually warming up properly is going to really help. And then, of course, just making sure that your hip strength is there as well. So people tend to overlook adductors and abductors, and that's actually really, really important when you're squatting. And that can lead to a lot of discomfort in the knee if those muscles aren't strong enough. So, I mean, people are so quick to jump to, oh, it's my meniscus, or oh, it's degenerative changes, I have arthritis, but really taking a step back and looking at the mechanics of the movement and the strength and the stabilizing forces are very, very important. And of course, if it is something that's been ongoing, long time, chronic, then that's time to go see a PT. We'll give you lots of fun exercises.
Oh yeah.
Now, is there anything else that you would kind of do in assessing? Let's say this is a case study of someone who came to you. Is there any other kind of like tests or anything else that you would have this individual do to see like what the actual root cause might be? Like, are you gonna watch videos of them squatting? Or are you gonna have them do certain exercises to test kind of like ratios of strength? What are you gonna do in this situation?
Well, during the eval, I look at the squat mechanics, and I'm also having to do a single leg squat because that is very telltale of the adductor strength or abductor strength. So you can see a lot of dynamic collapse that way. And then, yeah, just if it's someone who regularly goes to the gym and everything, I'm asking them specifically what their programming is. And then, of course, if they're running a lot and things of that nature, then I'm going to look at their running mechanics as well.
Cool. Mike, anything you would add?
No, not really. I think those are like the big things is kind of like watching the patient do what they're trying to do, they're having issues with is important. Like they teach you, or at least they taught us, like a patellar grind test in PT school, which I always thought was so dumb. It's like, that they have pain there because they're literally telling you that they have pain right there, and then you just like push on it basically. Yeah, so it's like, well, of course
Does that hurt?
Worse. Yeah, it's like bazinga, I found it. Yeah, I always thought that was so silly. So no, I think totally for those types of patients, which I get a lot of back home, less so here so far, which has been interesting. See a lot of anterior knee pain back at Eglin, and I'm looking at how they're squatting. That's the big thing, single leg squat. Then taking a look at like hopping as well, hopping and jumping for runners, checking. I don't do a whole lot of like manual hip like muscle testing anymore, because generally, if they're coming in, I'm generally going to get them on a strength building program anyway that's going to incorporate it. So whether they're weak or like incredibly strong, which they're not, I'm going to give them stuff anyway. So yeah, no, I totally agree. Functional evaluation for these people all the way.
Well, now we can stick with the knee here because the next question is also knee related. We got plenty of knee questions here. Lateral knee pain while training legs or trying to run. So we're moving kind of from that anterior compartment of the knee. Now we're moving out to the lateral side of the knee. Someone comes to you, they say, hey, I've got lateral knee pain when I train legs or when I try to run. Mike, what are some of your first thoughts there?
So, I mean, like, if you're just thinking about, anatomically what could be going on, and, especially when you talk about running too, IT band syndrome, comes to mind. With all these syndromes and stuff, I mean, that's really just kind of a word for describing, what they are describing to you, just like kind of shared understanding, basically. I mean, it's not something I would say like, yes, I've diagnosed you, it's this. But, you're going to look at it and be like, oh, you have pain here because you got maybe some, like a bursa there that's getting a little bit agitated, perhaps, or you're just, maybe running a lot more than usual, running a lot more than usual in like on a track in one direction and never changing direction actually can be something that can affect that, just because you kind of are always leaning in one way. That's something I've seen a lot, like in basic training populations after they run in a circle for a long time and previously had never done that, which is the big takeaway here is like, it's a sudden increase or change in their training volumes that generally is going to cause that. So IT band is going to be a big one. You can't stretch it or roll it out. I've cut them in anatomy lab, and you can't like accidentally do it with a scalpel either. You have to be pretty deliberate as far as how you want to get at it. So I would just say, you can save your breath or effort as far as, trying to stretch or roll it. It just feels bad. But generally I'm looking at a lot of like hip strength with those two conditions there, especially on the outside. So that's gonna be a lot of it. Plus
it's also a very painful area to roll. If anyone has ever rolled that kind of area before, and true story, when I was at UCF, I used to watch guys roll their IT with inch thick PVC, and they would like push each other down onto this.
That's
my
why
IT band, my IT band is tight. Like, okay, yeah, it was designed that way.
Yes, it's good.
Maria, what do you think when you see lateral knee pain? Maybe less of the running, trying to train legs. From the training aspect of thing, what are people overdoing that may be causing this pain?
I would say, kind of piggybacking off of what Mike said, with just the mechanics, there's something funky going on there with the mechanics. There's too much loading on one side of the knee. And of course, going back to IT band, it's usually the root cause. The bursa is irritated. So I know in the case study that I saw recently with one of my patients, goes back to running, unfortunately, but she completely threw off her running mechanics during a marathon because she'd sprained her ankle. So she's putting all this weight on the other side, and then she comes in with IT band syndrome. And I'm like, well, that kind of makes sense. So just looking at the strength of the hip muscles, going kind of back to that again, that's usually the route that I go. And then, of course, explaining the whole you can't really stretch it out kind of thing as well, because like he said, cutting in cadaver lab, you can't just accidentally do it. It takes a few scalpels. It really does. So that's what I'm looking at, is more like the hip strength side of things when there's something going on as far as actual strength training.
All right, now Mike, I need you to completely guess at something for me. Are you ready?
Okay. Yes.
Okay, so you said that running around in a circle in one direction over and over can cause those overuse injuries. What if I'm a NASCAR driver and I'm constantly turning in that one direction? Do you think that they have overuse injuries in like the one side of their neck that's constantly
I don't know.
Given all your work with NASCAR, what would you say?
Right. Yes. Well, so first of all, I should clarify. I don't mean to say that running around a circle is going to cause an injury or anything like that, but there's less variability there, I guess it would be the word for it. And you're kind of maybe putting a little bit more stress on the one side. But yeah, I guess it's possible. They probably do have like some neck pain and stuff, but also I don't know. It'd be really interesting. I literally have no idea. To be honest with you.
NASCAR, give us a call. We're trying to get that NASCAR money.
NASCAR sponsorship, that'd be good.
For real. All right, moving along. Number 6, we've got low back pain. This is such a funny question. Low back pain due to disc herniation versus muscle strain pain. Maria, do with that what you'd like.
So yeah, when I got this question, I tried to at least write it out. I didn't know what to do with it. So
wait, did you correct it? Was it worse than that when you got it?
Yes, it was.
Oh my God. Was it like low back hurt, my disc good, or ouch muscles?
You're right. Usually acute strains to the low back are going to be muscle related unless there's something like crazy traumatic that happens. So I tend to see people when things are chronic. I don't usually see acute low back pain. So when I see them, I'm they usually have an MRI already, and they usually say, oh yes, I have herniation at this site and this site. I'm like, well, honestly, the herniation probably doesn't have a whole lot to do with it. You know, I word it very nicely, but when it comes down to it, usually the spinal stabilizers are very weak. They have poor lumbar mobility through whatever reason. And so I'm focusing more on spinal stabilization exercises, working on making sure they're actually activating their core muscles when they're bending down to lift something. Those are the things that I focus on, and then usually the pain subsides along with it because we're doing that. And then of course the manual techniques as well to work on that. But yeah, the disc herniation thing, I try to educate a lot that even if there is a small herniation, that's probably not the root source of the problem. And usually the pain, if it is acute, it will go away on its own with proper treatment.
Mike, any input that on that?
Oh,
Getting some
man.
heavy feedback there.
Is it better?
Yeah, now we're good.
Okay. Yeah, man. Yeah, those are always tough situations. So I do see kind of a pretty good mix. I see tons of chronic low back pain here as well, but also a lot of acute, like same day sometimes. And those are actually, I always find those are like pretty fun because, you know, if you can kind of get their symptoms to go down, they really think that you're like PT God basically, which isn't like why I don't get my rocks off that, but it does feel good to like help people out when they're like, but anyway, as far as how I would approach this, I would probably approach it literally no different because I frankly, most of the times, similar to the patella question that we were having earlier, like, you know, if there are neuro, you know, findings or things like that that would make me suspicious of like neurological involvement, you know, we screen for that for sure. But in the absence of those signs or, you know, red flag signs, things that would be, you know, making you feel like they have like maybe like cauda equina or something like that, which is, you know, a medical emergency. I generally I don't want to say I don't care where the pain is coming from because that's not accurate. I do care where the pain is coming from. Rather, I care how I think we can kind of make headway in getting them feeling better about moving again, especially, you know, and when they come in with like their MRI or like, you know, like preconceived ideas about like what's going on or what they think is up. A lot of it is kind of fighting against that because it's typically wrong, which is frustrating. But, you know, a lot of education and then a lot of, you know, I like, you know, low level core exercises and stuff like that, low level hip exercises, you know, in a way, is it like strengthening them, especially acutely? Like probably not, because, you know, we know it takes time for you to actually get strong, right? So that's like chronically over the course of, you know, weeks, months, and people are going to get like strong. But I think, you know, acutely, you know, how is it that they feel better after you have them do like, you know, glute bridges and some other stuff for, you know, a week or two? And I think it's probably just because you're kind of giving them maybe something to kind of maybe distract them a little bit, get them feeling a little bit better about moving again. And I think that kind of helps to drive down some of that initial pain. And then, yeah, you know, long term, you try to get them strong.
So I think there's a lot of like misinformation from what I've seen from PTs that I know. I see talking a lot. I think there's a lot of like misinformation on like disc herniations and kind of just disc injuries in general and what the actual ramifications of that are. Is that kind of like a meme, or is that real? What's going on with that? And where do you think that kind of stems from?
I mean, I feel like the disc herniation thing, so many people focus on it and so many people just assume that it's the root cause of their problem. I think that's where a lot of the issue has arisen. But most people, by the time they're older, like 50s, 60s, they're going to have some kind of disc herniation, regardless of whether they have imaging or not. That's just kind of the way it is. Lumbar spine, cervical spine, doesn't really matter. That's where a lot of the stress is. I mean, gravity. So I think people just hype it up a lot more than it should be. So a lot of it's just education on our part, just like Mike was saying, teaching people that it's okay to move and it's okay to get back into exercise as long as you're doing things the right way.
Cool. Mike, anything on that?
Feedback again. No, I think that pretty much sums it up there as far as that goes. Just it's not something that's unfortunately not going to get fixed with one Q&A video, because it's a whole like societal attitudes towards low back pain and like disability. You could go real deep. You gotta stay woke. On like Instagram and stuff like that with like PTs, it definitely has become like a meme, though. I would agree with that, which is, funny sometimes, kind of obnoxious other times.
So do you think it comes from like is it like oh bro, like your doc doesn't lift so he doesn't understand? Is that the issue? Is it more on the patient end where people kind of view it as like such a bad injury and catastrophize it? What's kind of like where's the issue, and where do we go from there? So like I come to you, I say, hey, I just got diagnosed with a disc herniation. Like how long until I'm paralyzed?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I think education is like absolutely kind of the issue there. And I mean, in a way, maybe you were educated that you have a disc herniation, which maybe is true. I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying it is or isn't true. If you asked me to put down, $100 on a bet, I'd probably bet that you probably do, just given what I know about you. I know a lot about you, so much. But no, I think it comes down to kind of impressing upon the patient the so what. So it's like, yes, that's true. Like it's not a lie. You have that. If it was diagnosed with an MRI or whatever like that, they can actually like look at that structure. But then the so what is like, what does that actually mean for you? And if we stop at just the diagnosis, and then even worse, if we stop there and then say yeah, you'll be you're gonna have pain forever. Don't ever like pick up a gallon of milk again or something like that. It's like what's somebody gonna do? They're gonna be like scared because they see immediately they associate that with was it Ronnie Coleman who had like all the back surgeries and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to like judge anybody's situations, but they imagine that like he liked lifting weights too, and now look at him, he's can barely walk. God, that's gonna be me. And so it's a lot of educating that no, not necessarily gonna be you, and then kind of impressing upon them the positives of their situation, which generally there are numerous positives that maybe don't get highlighted. So.
Yeah, I like the way I like the so what kind of example that you gave and I kind of relate it back to nutrition. People like talk about like metabolic damage or metabolic downregulation in a similar light. They're like, oh, I've been dieting, I've lost 20 pounds, and I've got all this metabolic downregulation, and it's kind of a similar response. It's like, okay, well, so what? That's natural. That was going to happen. So it's similar. If you're very active, you've lived a long, active life, you're probably going to have some of these disc herniations down the line. And so what? That's not going to really impair your life. Maria, any closing statements?
Nope, I think Mike summed up very well.
Good job, Mike. Way to be.
Oh boy.
All right, we're coming up on our 45 minutes. That's going to wrap us up for today. Any closing statements from Mike other than go Knowles, because no one wants to hear that?
Yeah, go Knowles, go Knowles, go Knowles again. I'll say it again. No, this was fun. Look forward to doing this some more to our, maybe 2 people. Just kidding. If people are watching this, you got questions, shoot us questions. This worked out better than I thought. I was a little bit concerned that like the specifics of it was going to be like, oh, geez, it depends fest. But I think we were able to, not be too in the weeds, but also maybe give some practical-ish things that you could try if these things sound like you. But if not, definitely, go see a PT, go see your doc who can refer you to PT if you live in a state where you can't just go see a PT. But yeah, that would be my big thing. If you're struggling, it's worthwhile if you are with the right one. So that would be my other thing. If you've had bad experiences in the past with like, your doc didn't even lift or whatever, they don't necessarily have to lift, but they have to understand what you want. So, shop around.
Maria, what do you got? What do you got for us? Close us out.
Well, I mean, as injury specialists for Gifted Performance, we definitely have resources to help. So if there are athletes watching this that actually have current conditions that they want us to check out, of course, reach out to myself or Mike, and we will help you as best we can. And then, of course, if it's something that is outside of our scope or you need further clarification, then of course going to actually see a PT, specifically a sports PT, will be very beneficial.
Great closing statement. And as always, folks, you know what to do. Stay gifted, and we'll catch you on the next one. See ya.